One thing that I've observed over the years and still observe today is that a lot of people spend their careers waiting for permission, waiting to be noticed, waiting for confidence, waiting for the magical intervention that in most cases never really comes. And my guest today believes that that mindset is why so many talented people fail to reach their potential or achieve their dreams. Baldwin went from being an overlooked basketball player with no scholarships and no major opportunities to building a professional sports career, a global personal brand, a business built around performance and discipline and mental toughness. So he was clearly taking initiative, and you'll hear his story as we talk today. Millions of people have watched his content online, but what makes his message resonate isn't just sports, it's his ability to break it all down into things that people can clearly understand, and his relentless focus on accountability and consistency. When everyone else is promising hacks or shortcuts or offering simple feel-good motivations, Dre argues that discipline is the real separator, and he shows up consistently day after day. His website is called All Day Dre. That pretty much says it. Today, we're going to be talking about self-belief and leadership and career reinvention, and we'll discuss why so many professionals unknowingly cap their own potential. By listening or watching, my goal for you is to identify where you can release some of the constraints that you may be placing on yourself, and you are going to feel Dre's palpable energy. I'm convinced of that. I'm J.R. Lowry. This is Career Sessions. Dre, thank you for being with me today.
I'm excited to be here, JR. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Doing excellent. Thank you.
Glad to hear it. All right, well, let's get going. So give us your backstory. You, I know, fought your way into the professional basketball ranks. How did you do that? How did discipline help you in addition to just being really motivated?
I started playing basketball around age 14, which is pretty late if you're going to play in college, let alone play pro. So barely played in high school, walked on the Division III level of college, which is not the level that produces pros. So I had to sell myself into professional playing opportunities, which I was able to do successfully. And at the same time, I started publishing content on this new website called YouTube in 2005. And that's where I started to kind of build a name for myself online, exclusively through just basketball training. I was just on the court doing drills and showing other players how to practice and get better. About 5 years into that, at the time I'm still playing professionally. I'm playing overseas, traveling different countries every year. I started to sell programs. I started to make training programs for basketball players. At this time, self-publishing became a thing. That's when I started to write books. And also, athletes started asking me about the mental side of the game, JR. And when I started talking about those things, that's when the non-sport professionals started to find me, because they said the way that you break down and explain things, not only mindset, but other aspects, this is useful for us, and we don't even play sports. So that's how I knew what my segue would be out of sports into the next chapter of my life, because we all know athletic careers are very short. So when I stopped playing sports in 2015, I went full-time into working with professionals and entrepreneurs on not only mindset, but also strategy, systems, and execution, which is where we are today.
So talk a little bit about when you talk about breaking it down in a way that resonates with people who aren't professional athletes. How do you take somebody who's juggling work and family and all of the related pressures that come with that and explain what worked for you and the things that have been difference makers in your life to somebody who's just living that kind of normal day-to-day existence?
Great question. Well, I take the same things that work in any professional realm, the same stuff that works in sports works there. Because sports is a great canvas from which to explain it. And that's the reason why I was able to translate it the way that I did. And it's those four pieces that I just mentioned. So the first one is mindset. It's the way that you think, because the way that you think leads to how you speak leads to what you do, and what you do becomes your habit, your character, your virtue, and your destiny. So that's starting off with just the mindset. What is the mentality around your behavior? Because if you want to change your behavior, you have to change the way that you think. That's the first thing that starts. And I don't mean in a woo-woo motivational sense. I mean, if your mindset is leading you to take certain actions that are not getting you what you want, then we have to change the way you look at the situation so you can change your behavior. The second one is the strategy. Strategy is simply a plan of action. A plan of action does not have to be a 100-page SOP. Plan of action can be 3 steps. Wake up, put your shoes on, go outside. That can be a strategy as well. So strategy is a plan of action designed to achieve a clearly defined goal. And interestingly enough, JR, a lot of people operate with no strategy. They have a lot of talent, time, energy, but no strategy. So what we usually do is deconstruct strategy from the goal back to the present moment. The third thing is the systems. And the system is a set of steps to be followed that can be done duplicatively and repeatably and doesn't require the specific talent of any individual person. So I can have a strategy that works for me because some of my talents are part of that strategy. But for me to make it into a system has to be duplicatable by somebody who doesn't have my talent, my knowledge, my experience, hasn't been where I've been, but they can still execute it and get it done. Best example of this is you look at a Starbucks, you look at McDonald's. They don't have to hire PhDs. They can hire people who can just follow instructions. You can follow instructions, they can make it work. And then that last one is the execution. And this is the biggest thing for professionals, is that what we usually call leadership just means execution done in a disciplined way over an extended period of time. It's executing over and over and over and over again. When you're following the system, it's usually a lot easier to do than when you're having to figure it out on the fly. Even when, again, you're highly resourced, very talented, smart, and you have a lot of energy, you eventually can burn yourself out if you don't have a simple process to follow that allows you to put it on autopilot.
James Clear in Atomic Habits, others have certainly written about habits, but he probably is best known for the one who really talks about the fact that you don't rise to the level of your goals, but you fall to the level of your systems. And systems, as you say, allows people to put things on autopilot so that they just become things that they do. And over time, when you build those things, they do start to accumulate, and you start to realize that you can accomplish more and more and more and more bit by bit over time.
Yes, I agree. And having those systems in place, once you know what you want to achieve, or you achieve it even by, let's say, accident, you weren't trying to do it systematically, but you achieve it, then the next thing is, how do I deconstruct what I just did to make sure that it actually works? And again, this can be something as simple as how you like your hand towels folded in the bathroom, but it also be something much bigger. Like, how did I close that deal? How did I get that prospect? How did I get them to this position? How can I do that over and over again to where I can hire a salesperson and a whole team?
You're an entrepreneur. That's especially important when you're an entrepreneur. Take something that you haven't ever done, certainly in the context at least of your business. You do it, you start to figure out what will make it successful. You systematize it, you hand it off to somebody. And I think if you're a successful entrepreneur, you keep doing those things because you've got to focus your time on the things that are the biggest difference makers. You can't do everything, and you've got to make sure that you've got something that you can hand off that they will be able to pick up and be successful with. And that takes skill too.
Yes, it does. And that's a really important skill if you want to, at some point, let's say, exit your business, sell it to someone else. If you want to bring other people into the business to replace you at certain jobs, if you want to pass it on to your kids, it can't all just be based on your individual talents. So that's where the systems and just the ability to break things down and put them back together, which is really, JR, my personal superpower.
Yeah.
That ability works wonders when you're trying to build systems for yourself or for others.
Talk a little bit about how you take some of those same things, the mindset, the strategy, the systems, the execution, and you apply it when you're reinventing yourself, right? You've gone through that yourself. A lot of people, especially as people are having longer careers, go through periods where they have to reinvent themselves. And talk about that journey for you and how you applied some of those same practices, the 4 things that you've talked about, when you shifted out of your professional basketball career and into some of the things you're doing now.
Reinvention happens, JR, when your identity is too small for your ambitions. So when you see where you want to go in the future, but you look at how you currently see yourself, you see that this person is not going to match that future. That's when the reinvention happens, and it starts on the inside out. So the first step is, let's just use myself as an example. When I'm moving into entrepreneurship, the first thing is I have to get my mind out of the athlete mindset, out of I'm going to solve this with physical exertion, which is what athletes do. So if I have a challenge, I solve it by going to the gym, working on my game more, getting better, winning the next game, even though I lost the last game. In business, you can't do that because that's not the way the game is played. It's played a different way. So you have to reshape the way you see yourself and reshape who you see in the mirror so that you start thinking automatically more on a business level than on an athletic physical exertion level. So that's an example of the mindset piece. As far as the strategy piece is finding people who have already solved this puzzle, who've already figured out, okay, what can I take from what I did as an athlete and how can I use this in a professional world? So I was fortunate enough to have mentors in the game who would say to me, Dre, you have this framework. I called it work on your game. You have this idea, work on your game, that's very useful because in the professional world, what people like about athletes, and you kind of asked me this question earlier, JR, they like the fact that you have to show up every day, as anybody at a job does. You have to be disciplined and do your work even when you don't feel like it. There are times when things don't go the way they're supposed to. In sports, that's losing a game. In business, it can be a myriad of things. You still have to keep showing up. And it's competition. A lot of sales industries love athletes because we're used to competition and we can deal with the back and forth, the ups and downs of going through competition. And you have to move yourself to perform at your highest possible level because you're competing against a lot of people to keep your job at the top 2% of the sports world. And in the professional world, employers love people who are going out there and trying to compete. maybe not against other people, but often against themselves, against the benchmarks and against their quotas. So how can you take all that stuff? This is what was told to me. How can you take all that stuff and make it translatable for someone who has never picked up a ball? And again, JR, what I told you, my superpower is my ability to extract from one place and be able to communicate it to another place. So I can talk to someone who's never played basketball before, but within 10 minutes, I can have you pretty well understanding the game. And anything else, if you were to explain to me something that you know at a high level that I never heard of, about an hour of conversation, I can understand it enough that I can take 10 minutes and help somebody else at least get about 60, 80% of the basics of it. So that's what I did with my experience as an athlete. And I began to translate it to the professionals. And of course, at the same time, you update your formulas while you're learning. So as I'm talking to more entrepreneurs, I'm talking to more professionals, I'm finding out what their challenges are. What are they dealing with? They had to deal with superiors. They had to deal with middle management. They had to deal with teams that they inherited that they did not choose. It's the same thing that happens in sports. You deal with different types of leaders, different types of teammates, different types of opponents. You're on different teams where you may not like the situation, but you're signed to a contract. So you still had to show up and do your job. So all of these pieces are translated out of the sports world into the business world.
So there's two follow-ups I want to ask you from what you just said. One, you mentioned earlier that you played in a lot of different countries. Mm-hmm. You had to fit into a lot of different team systems. You had to fit into a lot of different international cultures. How did you learn to become more adaptable through that process? Because I'm sure that was a key requirement for your success.
So in the sports world, the good part about it is basketball is universal. It's kind of a universal language. So I remember I was playing in Herceg-Novi, Montenegro, and my coach did not speak English. None of the coaches spoke English, and I don't speak any other languages. I know a little bit of Spanish, but they don't speak Spanish over there in Herceg-Novi. And I had two teammates who could speak English, and they would be my translators. The good thing about that, I always joke, is that if the coach talked to the team for 30 minutes and the teammate gave me the translation, it'll be like 2 minutes long. So I could always pretend that I don't know what the coach said because I literally didn't know what he said. But on the court, there's certain movements of basketball and there's certain things that can be communicated. Pass here, set a screen, grab the rebound. Those are universal languages. So as long as I had the basketball skill, we could communicate on the court to a certain degree. As far as off the court, by the time that I started playing, which was in 2005, a lot of the, let's say, people under the age of 30, a lot of them heavily influenced by what goes on in America. They watch our TV, they're looking at our internet, they listen to our music, they're watching our entertainers. So they speak English actually pretty well. That was under 30 then. By now, it's probably under 50. Yeah. So a lot of people speak English pretty clearly. They understand the stuff that we pay attention to. So there were always some people in town, whether they were players, whether they were teammates, whether they were just people who were fans of the local team. They would come find me and I would make friends with them and they could show me around town, tell me what to do, what not to do, etc. So it was actually a pretty smooth transition almost everywhere that I went. Also, keeping in mind that you're an athlete traveling the world to play sports. I'm 6'4", so you're a 6'4" black guy walking around somewhere in Eastern Europe. They know why you're there for the most part.
Yeah, that's probably true. The other thing I wanted to ask you is when you shifted out of basketball and into your business career, what was the hardest part of that transition for you?
One is that you have to get used to doing quote unquote real work. A lot of athletes don't like when I say that, but the reality is when you're an athlete, a hard day of work is 4 hours.
Yeah.
That's a 2-hour practice in the morning and a 2-hour practice at night. Now, if you have a game, that's 2-3 hours. That's a work day. And when you're an entrepreneur, you're a professional, especially high-performing professionals, 8 hours is like you're slacking, right? So there's much longer days. And also as a professional and entrepreneur these days, there's always more work to be done. So we have to pull ourselves away from the desk, pull ourselves away from the office because there's always more that we haven't completed that we could be doing. So it's a lot more work, especially when you're trying to start a business, get it off the ground or establish yourself in a certain market to achieve market penetration. So you have that. And also getting people to respect your name and know who you are. Because when you first come in, when I first stopped playing and came into the business world, talking about these kind of concepts, not exactly what we're talking about exactly here, because it's been some time, but at first they're looking at me like, okay, it's cool that you play basketball, but what does it have to do with us? How can you help us? Do you have any bona fides in this space working with these people? We know you can talk to the basketball players, but what about us? So you have to establish yourself. You got to prove yourself. And a lot of athletes may not want to do that work because it is a lot of work to get yourself established as, okay, don't look at me and see athlete, look at me and see this person is in this space. They just happened to have been an athlete. And by this point today, I've established that. But at first, that was not established.
Yeah, I mean, I think about when you were doing that, it sounds like this goes back roughly 20 years at this point. When you were first getting into this thing called YouTube and producing content, you were probably a bit ahead of that trend in terms of making that transition. And I'm sure you had to learn a lot of hard lessons along the way.
Yes, and a great thing was that what we now know as social media was just coming out right when I got out of college. I graduated in 2004.
Yeah.
So Facebook comes out about the next year, then you get all the other social apps, and then it became easy to go direct to consumer. You didn't have to go through a middleman to publish a book, to have a radio show, which we call a podcast, to have a TV show, which we call YouTube. So the middlemen were all gone, and there were no barriers to entry at the exact time that I was looking to figure out what am I going to do professionally. So yes, athletes started thinking about those things, but also all people now could do them because there was nothing blocking anybody from putting themselves out there. So it's also a fortuitous bounce, we could say, with the way the world went for me to be able to do that.
I know you write and speak a lot about presence. I will tell you your presence is palpable, even though we are on video here together. I can sense it right from the beginning. Talk about how you build presence. Not everybody will have the natural presence that you do. So for somebody who feels like they struggle with that, or people often get told you lack executive presence, how do you coach them on building their own form of presence?
And that's an excellent question, because I talk to a lot of professionals working in organizations who come with that exact challenge, is that they have a leadership or authority position in some level, but the people who they allegedly have authority over don't listen to them. And they're asking them to do things that people aren't actually following through, or people are taking their orders as suggestions. And their higher ups will say to them, listen, if you want to get this promotion, you need that executive presence, because we can't put you in charge of more people if the people are not listening to you. So it's an excellent question that you're asking. And first, let's get clear what presence is. Presence is discipline embodied under pressure. It's the same things done the same way every time, consistently following a structure. And then the under pressure part doesn't necessarily mean like you're sweating bullets and there's a gun to your head. Under pressure just means things are not normal. Everything is not easy and comfortable. That's what under pressure means. So as soon as a situation goes off kilter, that's under pressure. Can you maintain your presence of mind, maintain your state, maintain that discipline and that collectiveness even when things are not going the way that you want them to go? That's what presence is about. And how can someone develop the presence? Well, the first thing is you have to learn to quiet the mind. And quieting the mind means not allowing whatever outside noise is happening to throw you off the game that you're supposed to be playing in the moment. So it's lessening your reactivity, lessening your output, lessening the noise going on in your mind and noise that you put out. So in presence, we talk about 4 specific things. The first one is groundedness. Groundedness just means being rooted in the reality of what's happening right now in the moment. And a lot of people, if you listen to the biohackers, there's a lot of them down here in South Florida. They talk about when you start the day, the best way to start the day is you want to get some sunlight while the sun is still coming up, because the UV rays are not as strong. And you want to let your bare feet touch the ground, touch actual grass or dirt or something like that. These days, some people call it touching grass. Like you need to touch grass. And what does it mean? It means you're connected to what's actually happening, connected to the earth. Groundedness means you are focused on the present moment, and where you are is where your mind is. Your mind and your feet are in the same place. And what happens with a lot of people these days, JR, is that their mind is somewhere way different than where they're actually at physically, because there's so many distractions that we have. This is like a person, they're at the park playing with their kid, but with one hand, they're looking at their phone. So mentally, you're in one place, but physically, you're in another. That's the opposite of groundedness. Groundedness is be where you are. The second one is stillness. Stillness means reducing your mental output, what's coming out of you through what's going on in your mind. In other words, if you are angry, if you're frustrated, not allowing that anger or frustration to show through what you're saying or through your physical presence. The third one is containment. The containment is lowering of the actual tangible output, things that you do, not doing more than you need to do, not fidgeting, being able to stand still, being able to maintain actual solid eye contact, not reaching for your phone every 5 minutes when you're standing at the airport gate waiting for your flight. It's actually physically not moving when you don't need to be moving. And so stillness and containment are about the emotional and the physical, keeping it in. And the last one is calibration. Calibration is about you offering a proportionate response to the situation at hand. So if you ever see somebody overreacting, that's an uncalibrated response.
Right.
Or when somebody underreacts, that's an uncalibrated response. And when someone's calibration is off, then they can say all the right things, but the message just doesn't quite land the right way. So when you get those four things aligned, groundedness, stillness, containment, and calibration, that's when the signal of all those aligned comes out as what people call presence.
How do you factor into that, the idea of being both decisive in those moments of pressure and also being empathetic?
Excellent question. So being decisive is about cutting off other options. Because the word decision comes from a Latin word. The root of it is a Latin word that means to cut off. That's what a decision is. You're cutting off everything else, and this is all that's left. And when it comes to being empathetic, it's about understanding how other people feel, maybe not necessarily feeling it yourself, but understanding somebody else's feelings. And what a leader must do, and this is something that I've told people for years, JR, is that a leader has to have the ability to disappoint people at a rate at which they can accept. Because a leader cannot please everybody. You cannot lead people and need people at the same time. That's not possible. And a leader, you can't be the class clown. You can't be everybody's friend while being a leader. Even if you want to be, you can't do that as the leader because you lose authority. And leadership requires a certain amount of distance between you and the people that you're leading. So the empathy part is helping people understand that I know this may be disappointing to you. However, this is the decision and this is the way that we're moving forward. So you can let me know how you feel about it, what you think about it. And also, most importantly, let me know what you need from me so that you can best help us as a team move forward with the decision that has been made. And that needs to be communicated in a calibrated way, in a way that people understand that I'm not asking you if you're going to follow it. I'm telling you this is what it is. I'm asking you, what do you need from me for me to best help you follow through on what we're going to do? And it's a really important point with, again, people who need that presence. You have to be able to communicate this in a way that you don't have to say what I just said explicitly, but people should still get the point.
Yeah.
That's what leadership is about.
How do you demonstrate that kind of presence in the absence of pressure, right? Because there are going to be moments in business where you're not fighting for your life. You're not on the playing field, metaphorically, as you are when you're an athlete, but they're just in the everyday moments. How do you show presence when the pressure isn't as present in the room?
It is when you establish, first of all, from the beginning, who you are and how you're showing up. How you walk in the room is how you walk out of the room. And you have to establish yourself as that leader, even when you don't have a leadership title, because that's really what gets you promoted. Yes, you can be competent, but you don't get promoted just because you're really good at the job. You get promoted because the people who are promoting you see you as someone who can lead and inspire others who are going to be doing the job once you move up, not just because you can outpace everyone else. So it's the way that you show up on a consistent daily basis, being present with people when you're talking to them, being able to motivate and inspire, being able to set the tone and setting the bar, setting the standard and upholding the standard to where other people look at you when they're trying to figure out what to do. That's what makes you a leader, because a boss is a person who can tell people what to do and they have to comply. A leader is a person who gets other people to do something because they want to. They see you and they want to get to where you're at, so they start following you even though there's nothing that says they have to follow you. And that's how you start to establish it, even when everything is calm and normal. Human beings, we are social creatures. So we are oriented to follow the leader. Who is the leader here? Who's going to take that leadership position? Even when no one has been appointed, you put a group of people who never met each other together, get them stuck in an elevator, somebody's going to take the lead and everybody's going to be following the lead of that person. And that's just human nature. So who is that person who has the calm? They seem to have an idea of what to do. They're willing to take on the risk of possibly being wrong. And everybody else who would rather follow them than make the decision themselves, they get behind that person when you carry yourself in that way. And again, it's not something that you announce. It's all in your energy. People have to remember that 85% of communication, or maybe more, is nonverbal. It's not what you say. It's how you carry yourself. It's what's being said, even when you're not talking. People get a pretty good read and understanding of who you are and what you're about before you even open your mouth. And that's where you establish leadership.
I would imagine you work with early tenured people as well. What do they misunderstand? For example, when an individual contributor becomes a manager, or when that frontline manager becomes a manager of managers, about what's required to be successful at the next level?
Well, the first thing is they have to understand that a certain amount of distance is required. Now, leadership requires a certain amount of distance between, leadership and authority require a certain amount of distance between you and your subjects, meaning you can't be the one joking in the lunchroom the way that you were before. You just can't do it because it undermines your authority. If people see you as a peer and they see you as a friend, then when it's time for you to use that authority, they're going to be offended by the fact that their friend is trying to tell them what to do or what not to do. So it's accepting the fact that that leadership comes comes with it in a package deal, a little bit of distance and a little bit more isolation. And a lot of people, when they ascend to management, don't want to deal with that isolation. They rather be part of the group. This is just a human thing. Many humans would rather be part of a bigger group than part of a smaller group because they feel more connected. But that's the reason why leadership is a burden, not only just a reward, it's also a burden. So that's one thing. And the second thing is that what got you here is not the same thing that's going to get you there. So what was working for you to move up, yes, it was you doing the job and also showing the leadership tools. But when you move up to a new position, you have to adjust to that position. And adjusting to that position means figuring out, okay, what works here? What worked there versus what's going to work here? Usually if you got ascended, you got moved up, promoted, the people who promoted you know what it takes. And they're going to tell you. And what I find is a lot of times people either are A, confused by what they're told, they don't know what to do with it, or B, they hear it and they kind of reject it because it seems a little bit cold, seems a little bit distant. It's, I don't want to be that type of person. And then they go out and try to do it their way and it ends up not working and now they're stuck. So it's heeding the advice from the people who already are in the position that you're in and asking yourself, how can I develop more of that? And a lot of it is not technical. It's not say this, push this button, send this memo. It's all in the way that you're carrying yourself. Again, that 85% of communication that is nonverbal, that's where leadership lives. It doesn't live in speeches. It doesn't live in memos. It lives in that communication. When people can feel that energy, they can peg you as a leader, even though they don't know who you are. The example I give people is that if you were watching an Amazon board meeting and we were just watching it on camera and I turned the sound off, you can't hear anything anybody's saying, and you don't know anything about Amazon, I would ask you after about 10 minutes, who's Jeff Bezos? He's the guy who runs the company. Point him out. Everybody could point him out. And why is that? Because you'll see everyone in the room orienting towards the boss, the leader, whoever it is, people physically orient towards them in a way that you can tell, even if you can't hear what's being said. And it's the same thing with human beings in any environment.
You know, you've taken a lot of initiative in the course of your career. There's clearly an entrepreneurial bent to the way that you think. A lot of people seem to be waiting for permission. How do you coach them to become more the masters of their own destiny?
Number one thing is, even if you are not an entrepreneur in name, you must be an entrepreneur in spirit, because even if you don't own the company, you own your career. So where do you want to go? You own yourself, because one day you're not going to be working here, whether it's the day you retire or you change companies, you change industries. Where do you want your career to go, and what do you want your career to be about? And you have to take ownership of that, because the company that you're at, as long as you're doing a good job, they'll keep you. But is this where you want to go? If you want to go somewhere else, then you need to ask yourself, where is it that I want to be and what is required there? And the first step, again, it's not the technical skills, it's the interpersonal abilities, it's the presence, it's the how do I see myself when I look in the mirror? And you carry yourself in a certain way that makes people know, without you saying it and without them asking it, okay, this person looks like, they feel like the type of person that we want in this position that we need fulfilled. It's not necessarily do you have the skill. Because skill these days is a dime a dozen. I'm not saying that the skills don't matter. Yes, develop your skills, work on your game, get better at the technical tools. But skill can be easily replaced by a lot of people. Most of the people listening to this, there are 100 people in your industry who could replace you and do the same job that you're doing with the similar training that you have. That's not what makes you valuable. What makes you valuable is how you are as a person, not who you are, how you are as a person. In the venture capital world, what a lot of venture capitalists say, VCs say that when we're looking at an entrepreneur and deciding who to invest in, we're not asking for someone who has all the answers or necessarily the best product, because you never know what's going to work, right? You invest in some, you think they're going to be amazing, they're trash, and you invest in some, you think they're going to be small, they blow up.
Right.
We said we're looking for someone who is magic about to happen, someone who's lightning in a bottle, and that's a feel. That's not a technical thing that you can write down and count.
Do you feel like you're lightning in a bottle?
Yes.
And what's the mix? Tell us about the mix of business things that you're doing today, Dre.
Well, the main thing these days is our execution reliability. And execution reliability is all about how do you show up consistently and execute the way that you're supposed to execute, upholding the standard, following the disciplines, and getting done what needs to be getting done, especially in organizations where the biggest challenge is not strategies or skills or mindset even, it's execution drift. Is that slowly over time, human beings, when not corrected or checked or held to accountability standards, they slowly drift off the path of what they're supposed to be doing. Not because they're trying to, but because without parameters and rules, you get chaos and disorder. So execution reliability is all about making sure that companies at scale, even as they expand, everyone stays on the process. That's our main focus these days.
Okay. Thinking back to when you started this journey, what's something about leadership that you felt back then that you've really changed your mind on since then?
The number one thing with leadership is about how people are responding to you, not necessarily about what you know. I'm a high processing person. Like I could explain for hours any subject, and I like doing that, but that's not what makes people follow you.
Yeah.
That makes people think that you're smart, but it doesn't make them follow you. What makes people follow you is the energy, and that's actually much, much less about what you say. It's much more about how you carry yourself. And what makes you a leader has nothing to do with talking. Yes, you talk. Yes, you can give speeches and say things, but that's window dressing. Real leadership is just about who people decide to follow when they have a choice.
For our audience that's trying to figure out what to do, has career uncertainty, maybe they're facing layoffs, which is, we've got a lot of that going on right now. AI is looming in the background as this threatening thing that a lot of people are feeling. What advice would you give somebody about managing their career over the next 3, 5, even 10 years?
AI is going to replace a lot of duplicatable tasks. And yes, it's already doing that and is going to continue to do that. But it will be a long time before artificial intelligence can replace human judgment. AI cannot do human judgment the way that humans do judgment. So your ability to discern, your ability to lead, your ability to make tough decisions when you have incomplete information, when you have unclear information, when there are a lot of different choices you could make and they all look equally good and bad, what you do in that moment and how you can get other people to remain confident and steady by following your energy. There's no artificial intelligence system that can do that because the human touch cannot be replicated by a computer chip.
At least not yet.
Not yet.
Any last thoughts you want to share with our audience before we break?
Biggest thing is that execution is really what makes the professional organization, and also the professional as a person. Continually doing what standard says to do, even under pressure.
All right. Lots of good lessons here. You are clearly a coach and teacher. It comes across as strongly as your presence, Dre, and I know you enjoy that, and it definitely shows just even in the brief conversation we've had today. I appreciate that you reached out to me to get this set up, and it was really good to talk to you, and thank you for your time today.
Absolutely, JR. Thank you for the time. Thank you for sharing your platform.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, what a fabulous discussion with Dre, and so much practical wisdom that he shared. The first thing to understand is that you got to take ownership for your career. And Dre describes people being constrained by a lack of ownership, not necessarily a lack of talent. And those who more consistently advance are the ones who stop waiting for these external validations and just start treating their careers like they're the CEO of their own business. As Dre said, you don't necessarily own the company, but you got to own your career. Second thing is that discipline creates opportunities that motivation alone never will. Sustainable success comes from the things that Dre talked about: mindset, strategy, systems, execution, doing that stuff day in, day out, even and especially when you don't feel like it and when conditions aren't perfect, because that's when everybody else gives up and that's when you really start to stand out. And the third thing is that leadership really starts with self-leadership and building presence. And that presence piece that Dre talked about really comes in moments of pressure where you've got to demonstrate the groundedness and the stillness and the being connected to what's right in front of you and not distracted by the many things around you. That's something that I think a lot of people really struggle with. And it's frustrating for rising people in their careers because they often get told, oh, you lack executive presence. And then they ask what that means and they don't really get a good answer. Dre gave some practical advice there that you can apply, whether you're an individual contributor, a new manager, a leader, or even in the C-suite. So lots of good advice from the discussion today. It was really great talking to Dre. Again, thank you to him for joining me. And I invite you to subscribe to Career Sessions on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube, or any other podcast platform that you happen to use. And if you found this discussion enlightening, I hope you did, then please join my membership community, which is called Pathwise, and subscribe to my newsletter, which is called Path Wisdom. Thanks. See you next time.